Welcome to the next tutorial. We're going to be talking about experience today and setting up a bare bones experience system. It's not going to be entirely functional because we have nothing that will actually give us experience yet. So we're going to just be setting up in a test method. If you remember way back when we did health, we inflicted damage on ourselves because we don't have anything in the world to inflict damage on us. So it's going to be a similar sort of thing, but by the end of this episode, you'll be able to give yourself experience. That experience will then give you a skill point and you'll be able to check that experience inside the menu. So let's get started. The first thing I want to do is get all of our values or all of our variables for experience and put them all together, because these values are probably not going to exist without each other. So if you have a group of variables that you want to stick together and you want to be able to access them together or access them all, the best way to do that is a struct. Now, structs are short for structures. They are literally a structure of something. We're going to be using them in more complex methods in the future. So the best thing for us now is to get the hang of them. We'll start by clicking on the content folder and then creating a new folder inside there. And we'll call this structures because we are going to have a few of them. Then inside of here, let's right click, go over to blueprints and scroll down to structure. We will start this off with an S and then underscore experience. So this is what we're going to use to read and write or set and get all of our experience values. Hop into there. Let's drag this to the top. Here, it's already populated one variable for us. So here we give the variable a name and we also tell the structure what sort of variable it is. So you can have different types of variables grouped together. All of the variables for experience are going to be integers, because in my particular version of this game, you cannot get anything less than 1 experience point. So the first thing we'll need is experience points. This is literally what we'll get for killing an enemy. Then we'll add a new value and it would automatically populate from the previous variable. So because the first one was an integer, the second one will be an integer, and we'll call this experience needed. Now this is how much experience we need to get to the next level. Next, we'll add experience level, and this is the experience level. So we gain enough experience points to meet the experience needed requirement and we get an experience level. But then the other thing we'll need is skill points. So we'll get a skill point, but it can't be the same as the experience level because we're not going to be spending our experience level. We'll be spending the skill points. And these are the 4 variables that I would prefer to be grouped together because I'm likely going to be using them all together. So let's save that. If you wanted to set a default value, we could also do that here. So for example, I'm probably going to need 1,000 experience points to get to the first level. So let's set our experience needed here. Save that, close out of that. There are 2 widgets that we need to update this experience on. The first one is a throwback to the first created, which is our HUD. Open up the HUD, and I'm going to put my experience bar right alongside this health bar right here. To keep all my stamina, experience, health bars all together, I'm going to put them inside of a vertical box. That means that I set the size of the vertical box and I set the progress bars to fill and they will sort themselves out instead of me punching in the values every time. So I'm going to right click on the progress bar. I'm going to wrap with the vertical box and then I'm going to name this progress bar to health so I can understand it in the future. And then I'm going to set the health bar to fill. Now the vertical box has automatically taken the shape of our health bar before, so that's awesome. We will copy the health bar and paste it, and the health bar _1 will now be progress bar experience, and we will change that to auto, so it'll be naturally smaller. If we wanted to put it on top, we'll put it on top. I'm going to put this one on top because we'll put stamina down there later. And the color that I want to use for this bar will be scrolling down to fill color and opacity. Don't get confused by all these other values here. This is specifically for the bar itself. The color that is filled by the bar, for me, it's going to be white. So that'll be my experience bar. Compile and save that. So let's create a binding for this in the style of a function. Scroll down to the % and we will create a binding. And this will be get experience points. Now the final value has to be a float because there has to be a value of between 0 and 1. Let's start by getting our hero reference. And so now here's the part where we'd normally get our integer variable that lives inside of our character. So instead of adding 4 variables, now we'll add the struct there. So come over to Blueprints, click on Core, open up our b_hero, and we'll hit the variables, and we'll call this experience. Hit the drop down, and if we type in s_experience, there is our structure for experience. And we will compile and save that. And if we hit the drop down, we can see our experience here. So drag off hero, and now we will get experience. If you can't see this value, remember to compile and save. And now to get those individual values, we will break sExperience, which exposes all of those values. So for this, we only need the experience points and the experience needed. And while we could divide the integers first and then change them to a float, it's actually easier to change them to a float first. So drag out from our return value and hit the / to get a float divided by a float. Now when we plug experience points and experience needed in, it will automatically give us those conversion nodes. We can also click on the break sExperience node, or any structure node for that matter, and say hide unconnected pins over here. So we don't have to have those extra pins floating around. Now we'll just do some cleanup. And that's pretty much ready to go. Compile and save that. Now back over to our hero. Let's set up a little test script. So we type in key P, and then we'll scroll up until we see the P key right here. On top of key P, we're going to grab our experience and we're going to break it. Every time we hit P, we're going to set our experience. What we need to do instead of just setting experience is set members in sExperience. We can see that there's no pins here whatsoever. If we click the drop down, we'll expose our experience points pin because that's what we want to use. Now, if we click on essentially the getter, so this is a struct version of a getter and this is a struct version of a setter. It seems a little more complicated, but when you're dealing with large data values, it makes more sense. And wait until we get saving, because when we get to the save menu, you're going to thank me for compiling all these values together. So with that selected, we want to add 100 experience points every time we press the P key. And then we will put those points into that setter, and if we click on this and hit hide, we've cleaned it up. It's a few extra nodes, but this is for testing values more than anything. Now connect those all together. A little bit of cleanup, even though it's a test script, good to keep everything clean. We also need to put in an experience reference here for a struct reference. So we need a getter reference before we can set that. So now with those selected, let's hit Q again and hit compile and hit save, and we're all good to go. Over to the test map, let's hit play. The bar at the top is our experience. So now if I hit P, we are getting experience points. And by hitting the P key 10 times, we would get 1,000 experience points. But it doesn't make sense beyond there because we're not telling the game, hey, we have met this criteria, let's go to the next phase. But we'll do that in the